Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. This story here, Robin Westman, the active shooter that we know targeted a Catholic church and left a manifesto. And the story gets a little more complicated. First of all, 2 young boys were murdered, 8 and 10 years old. 17 people thus far are wounded by this person who left a manifesto filled with hatred and with craziness and sickness. Yet, what is baffling to me, with this manifesto, with this journal of hatred, with these guns he posted with magazines with, death to Trump, hatred to Jews, all kinds of horrific, hateful posts with his leaving what his intentions, kill Donald Trump on the side of his gun. Could it be any clearer what his motive was, or it was during the shooting, or is even after the fact? Is it unclear to the media? Are they that stupid, or are they that entrenched in ideology that they will not look at something that is straight in their face and say, oh, this is what he wanted to do? He obviously hated people. He hated groups of people. He made an intention of killing little children. He hated the Annunciation Catholic Church that he shot up through the glass windows from outside. He planned this. This was not a spur of the moment thing. The hatred that he showed, absolutely unbelievable. Yet our media is saying that they don't know what the motive was. I think we either need new journalists or they need to be re-educated as to what motive is. What is a motive then? If they don't see a motive here, what is the motive? What did this young nutcase, who was transitioning from a female into a male, and that also makes this very political. Or perhaps the drugs he was taking to transition causing him this anger? Was the mere fact of transitioning from a male to a female causing this anger? All these questions I surely don't have the answer to. But on Fox News, they have this retired NYPD inspector by the name of Paul Morrow, who I've listened to quite a few times in the past. And to me, he is a man of reason. He tells it like it is. He's a retired NYPD inspector. He has that law enforcement background. And in addition, he also has a law degree. So he's quite a learned man, quite articulate. And I want to listen to what he has to say. But first, folks, hold on to your hats. Hold on to your loved ones. Hold on to your thoughts and prayers, your peace of mind. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone. The police off-the-cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
I'm going to play this from Fox with the aforementioned Inspector Paul Morrow, who is interviewed on this show.
The inspector and Fox News contributor, Paul Morrow. Paul, there are so many different directions to go to on this story. It's still unfolding. I understand the mentality among some to say that simply talking about thoughts or prayers is not enough. You have to have things in conjunction with action. I get that, but it almost seems like it's this visceral, sneering, now trite, common response that we hear from some specifically on the political left to denigrate prayers after events like this. And it seems particularly odious given the context of where this shooting happened.
Of course it is. Of course it is. And if you look for the root cause here, one of the things that they're so hostile to is that organized religion is traditional. And it's another vector of society that they don't control, another thing that they don't control. And when I say they, I mean the progressive left, is policing. These are among the last bastions of traditionalism in American life. It's the kind of Americana they want to erase because it's not part of the approved narrative from our dominant media and from the progressive left who wants to own all aspects of your life. And what gets me is the sort of emoting that we see, like if somehow or other, if the mayor of Minneapolis shows enough outrage, that somehow or other that is supposed to convey a positive reaction or convince us. How about this? How about we enforce the gun laws that we have? Because according to the Pew Institute, which is a nonpartisan research center, 5% of gun murders every year are committed with long guns. You and I both know what that means for the rest of the murders. It's going to be illegal guns in urban areas for crimes that are not prosecuted. Thanks to our revolving door, illegal handguns are the things they don't want to talk about.
You mentioned approved narratives on that subject. Let's watch how some in the media have been reporting about the alleged shooter in this case.
A pervasive message of hate. Hate against blacks, hate against Jews, hate against God.
Some anti-black, anti-Semitic writings in these messages, anti-black, anti-Semitic, and anti-religious messages.
It's not that clear. Apparently, there are numerous ethnic groups, and
It's not that clear coming from the former second in charge of the FBI. This guy is a clown, not that clear. What do you need to make it clear? You're not a cop. You're definitely not a cop if you don't find clarity in what occurred here. Absolutely. This guy, I just cannot believe he even said that.
religions, there's anti-Semitic language in there. So it doesn't, I don't know that we have very hard evidence of a Catholic specific focus.
No hard evidence, except he targeted a Catholic church called the Ascension Church. He put inside his manifesto that he wanted to kill children inside this church. He used to be a member of this church and this school. Is this guy was the second in charge of the FBI? What's missing here? What part of his brain is missing?
There is no clear motivation or ideology.
All right, Paul, seems like at least some of those lists were leaving a few things out that might leave viewers thinking that this is much, much murkier and more mysterious than it might be.
Yeah, I would focus on the last one, because to me, that's the most egregious. No clear motive. Are you kidding me? I mean, the guy went to the school. He talks about how he was going to target it specifically and that he wanted to do it inside the church. The fact that he name checks a number of other things somehow or other is supposed to assuage the idea that this was very clearly an attack on a place that he knew well and that he wanted to target for his ideological reasons. And look, I am tired of wrapping myself around the axle trying to figure out what pronoun to use here. Okay, I'm just going to go to it. The shooter himself said that he regretted being trans and that he felt, quote unquote, his words now, that he had been brainwashed. And I got to say it, and we're supposed to not be able to talk about it. It's another elephant in the room that we're all supposed to ignore. But when you get into 6, 7, 8 trans shooters, that doesn't mean that all trans people are shooters. We're not saying that because we can't have these discussions. It's ridiculous. But once you get to the point where you have that many in a row, all I can say is, hey, be contrapositive. What if, Guy, the last 6, 7, 8 shooters, whatever it is, because the numbers vary and there are various people that get invoked here, but what if they had all worn MAGA hats and been young men? What kind of a narrative would we be hearing then? The whole world would melt down.
It wouldn't take 6 or 7 or 8. It would take 1 or 2. And we know that to be the case. And I'm not saying we should assign blame to any group of people, but these descriptors matter. And what he wrote on the gun, kill Donald Trump, anti-Israel slogans, clearly hated Catholics and Christians as well. All of these things are relevant to an ongoing investigation and to the discussion and the discourse around this terrible atrocity. Paul Morrow, good to see you.
So there's some of the politics of it. And the mainstream media, why are they not telling the truth? Why are they talking about or not talking about the elephant in the room? And Paul Morrow, a retired NYPD inspector, says, he's tired of basically walking on eggshells about this. This is the 6th or 7th active shooter that was a trans, or shooter. I don't know if we could say active shooter. So are we going to ignore this? Is there potentially a psychological problem with someone who's transitioning? Are the drugs they're taking to do that causing this? I don't know. I'm not an expert in this field, yet we cannot stop talking about it, right? And when we hear the media saying that they cannot discern whether or not there was what the motive was here, look at those magazines. Clearly he has a motive. Clearly he has hatred. Clearly he hates Jews. Clearly he hates Christians. Clearly he targeted this Ascension church. Thank God the doors to that church were locked so that he could not get inside. But when we then hear the media say that there was no clear motive, what are they talking about? And who is teaching them that? They really need to go back to school. It's just, to me, outrageous that it becomes, look, 2 young boys, 8 and 10 years old, were slaughtered. 17 people were shot. But yet, we're not seeing clearly as to what this was and what this is. Look, this sign you see up on the screen, active shooter response. Learn how to survive a shooting event. Run, hide, fight. 30 years ago, or whenever Columbine was, I don't have the exact date in front of me, they would have never suggested to run, hide, fight. They would probably tell you to cower like a scared fawn, But we know in the definition of an active shooter, the active shooter will keep shooting, keep taking people's lives until either the active shooter takes his or her own life or is taken out by law enforcement, taken out by the guns that take on the powerful guns that most active shooters bring to the scene. And Paul Morrow also suggested that it's very clear to progressives what to do in these instances. Oh, ban all guns. But yet they do nothing about the prosecution of shooters, and 95% of all shootings occur with a handgun. Across urban America, the progressives have no suggestions for that. In fact, they don't even want to prosecute people that shoot people or people that carry illegal guns. So what is that telling you? Has the politics of this just gotten so crazy that we can't separate active shooters from regular urban shooters? And the different guns, if someone uses a long gun, which according to Inspector Paul Morrow from Fox is less than 5% of all shootings. So 95% of shootings occur with a handgun. But people are just, what you hear is assault weapons. And then if you ask a progressive, what is an assault weapon? They absolutely cannot define it. They cannot define it. So has the politics gotten bigger? Something has to be done about active shooters. Absolutely. It's been going on for too long. And both sides, both Republicans, Democrats, have almost zero solutions to this. Can we mitigate this problem? Other countries, Europeans, are baffled by the amount of guns in this country. And a loose statistic is that there are 320 million guns in the United States. And largely that is because of the Second Amendment, that we as Americans in our Constitution have the right to keep and bear arms. But if you look at the statistics on how many legal gun owners use a firearm illegally, it's a pittance. But yet, most of these inner city shootings are done with handguns, and progressives do not want to prosecute, and they don't even talk about that. They just want to talk about, active shootings and combat style guns, long guns, weapons of war. Every weekend across this city, handguns are used to kill people, right? Weapons that are just as effective, as these long guns, AR-15s, M4s. The gun used in New York City to attack the NFL headquarters was an M4. So would the banning of these weapons have a big impact on the amount of people killed every year? And I'm not advocating not to do something about this. We must do something about the active shooter problem in this country, because it's a huge problem. It seems every 2 to 3 days, either on a campus, a workplace, a school, somewhere, an active shooter raises his or her ugly head. This is Newsmax.
The Annunciation Catholic school shooting, and the usual chorus is calling for more gun control laws, but critics are saying that the killer's own manifestos, well, they point to something else, something darker. Newsmax crime correspondent Jason Matera has the story for us this morning. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, Charlotte. Progressives right out of the gate, Amy Klobuchar, Jacob Fry, members of the legacy media, they're saying skip the thoughts and prayers, go right to passing more gun control laws. But what if the way to stop these school massacres is to take killers at their word? That is, to read their writings and see why they choose the target.
How much more explicit can they be than saying they want to go to a place where their victims aren't armed so they can go and kill more people there?
The Crime Prevention Research Center says the why isn't mysterious. Attackers like the Minneapolis trans shooter pick easy targets where they can run up a body count before anyone can fire back.
If the media, even once in a while, would quote these parts of their manifestos and diaries, the entire gun control debate that we have right now would be dramatically different. People would be focusing on getting rid of these gun-free zones.
For instance, according to Lott, the Minneapolis trans shooter wrote in his manifesto that the Aurora movie theater shooter, quote, may have chosen venues that were gun-free zones. I would probably aim the same way, adding that he wanted, quote, to make sure his victims would be unarmed. That's why I and others like schools so much.
I don't know how much clearer these guys can make it. There are literally dozens of similar statements like that over the years, going all the way back to Columbine, and yet the media refuse to go and say why he picked that target based on the fact that he wanted to go to a place where his victims weren't able to defend themselves.
As the do something chorus swells, Lott says that something never includes arming trained teachers and staff, even though he argues it could be the best way to stop an active shooter.
We have over 10,000 schools in the United States that have armed teachers and staff, okay? Many of them have had them for decades. There has not been one attack at any of those schools that allow armed teachers and staff to be able to go and carry where anybody's been wounded or killed during school hours.
So that's interesting, and you would think people not from the United States would find that as sort of a radical idea, to arm teachers, to arm the people that are educating our children. It sounds a little bit off the cuff, but if it works, because guess what? These shooters know, oh, there's an armed guard here, or there's an armed teacher, or they lock the front door, or they have really heavy security. They're not going to bother going to that location. Folks, a new sponsor of the Police Off the Cuff, FanDuel on the Believe Network. A lot of football is starting out this weekend. The SEC is starting out this weekend, and a lot of professional games. So if you want to make a bet, you can go on FanDuel. The SEC, Chris Phillips drops his SEC power rankings before week one, highlighting can't miss showdowns. Tigers versus Tigers in Death Valley, Texas versus Ohio State, Alabama versus Florida State, Tennessee versus Syracuse, and South Carolina versus Virginia Tech. The Irish breakdown, the legendary rivalry is back. Brian Driscoll and Trevor Trowbridge dive deep into the Notre Dame's upcoming Sunday showdown with the Miami Hurricanes, revisiting the epic Catholic versus convicts era that defined college football drama in the 80s and 90s. The duo breaks down everything at stake for the Fighting Irish in the marquee matchup. That's a beautiful thing. So, folks, the Police Off the Cuff podcast is sponsored by FanDuel, where you can go online and make a legal bet. So this whole situation is just absolutely outrageous. And our response to it, here he is with his manifesto showing up on the screen there. I'm not really satisfied. I don't think politicians have come up with ideas that will stop. There's been lots of suggestions. However, so far, we're getting just as many active shooters as we ever got, And on the screen, you see the media ask, what is his motive? If you get the media also asking stupid questions like that, when clearly the guy has hatred written all over his face, all over his guns, and he writes a manifesto and telling you what his intentions are, and the media asks, what's his motive? It's not clear. Just absolutely outrageous that they can say that. This is from News Nation. Put this up on the screen.
Motivated 23-year-old Robin Westman to do something so demonic. And the gunman left plenty of clues. Right now, Minneapolis police and the FBI are sifting through pages and pages, hundreds of pages, and a so-called manifesto, much of which was written by Westman shortly before the attack. The shooter appears to have been an equal opportunity hater. He left vile messages against Catholics, against Black people, against Mexicans, against Jews. He wrote how Israel must fall and how 6 million Holocaust deaths were not enough. He wrote, "Kill Donald Trump" on a rifle magazine. Now, deranged shooters don't just snap overnight. In this case, like so many others, there were red flags for years. A former friend from 7th grade says even then he would praise Hitler and talk about, quote, filthy Zionist Jews. That friend will join us in just a moment live on our show. She says Westman often wrote in code so nobody could understand his writing. And that would explain the Cyrillic alphabet used in his journal. Whole pages talking about suicidal thoughts and feverishly praising previous mass shooters. Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara said this afternoon Westman appeared to be obsessed with them.
This is an individual who, unfortunately, like so many other mass shooters that we have seen in this country too often and around the world, had some deranged fascination with previous mass shootings. And he fantasized about the plans of other mass shooters.
Those past mass shooters include the monsters who carried out the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting and the Aurora Theater shooting in Colorado. Those names were scrawled on a loaded magazine used in yesterday's attack. But through the scattershot screeds, there was one dark obsession that the gunman held dear: killing children.
The shooter wanted to kill children. The shooter wanted to watch children suffer.
And he knew exactly where to find children. The shooter had attended the Annunciation Catholic school. He knew that Mass would be taking place that morning with all those kids in attendance. He meticulously planned out the attack, even drawing diagrams of the church layout in his journal. He sprayed bullets through windows shortly after Mass started. He wasn't able to get into the church because the church had locked the doors when the service began, as was the regular practice to do. That small action likely saved many, many lives. But the terror was still all too real for those children inside the church once the shooting started. One neighbor described to ABC News how he ran in and saw boys and girls shot in the head and neck. One of them asked him to hold their hand. News Nation's Brian Enton has been on the story all day long. He
just absolutely horrific. And is it unclear from that report that does anyone after that report not understand what the motive was? Is there anyone? Maybe he doesn't have a journalism degree from Columbia University or Harvard or Princeton or any one of the Ivy League schools who writes for the New York Times. Is anyone not clear that the motive was hatred? Is there anyone not clear? I don't want to be obnoxious here, but it couldn't have been clearer, but yet very educated people are acting stupid, that what was the motive? You don't know what the motive was. My God, how could you not, Here he is, killed Donald Trump on his weapon, a manifesto that the police recovered, his intention in his writings to kill children, his hatred for Jews. What is not clear? One of the things I also want to get back into the active shooter type thing is we've studied this over the years, and law enforcement has studied this. And of course, up on the screen, I have the active shooter response: run, hide, fight. Except the mitigation belongs in the prevention of this. And in the prevention of this, we must look at the mental health of people that are trying to obtain firearms. And the media loves to call them assault weapons, all right? First of all, ask them to define what an assault weapon is. And then we must not allow mentally ill people. There must be a way to track them. Red flag laws that they don't obtain. In this shooter's instance, in Robin Westman's instance, he obtained 3 firearms legally. You think this guy was all there? You think he was mentally healthy? I don't think so. So how do we let someone like this obtain a firearm? The answer is we don't. We don't let someone like this obtain a firearm, but somehow he did. And that is inexcusable. Quickly, we go to something called hardening a target. And what does that mean? Well, this church was considered to be a soft target. But do you think if this little coward here, the shooter, would have known that someone there was armed? Robin Westman, you think if Robin Westman would have known someone at that location was armed, he would have picked a different place, because that place would have been hardened. But it wasn't. It was a soft target. So he chose the Annunciation Church because it was a soft target. He chose that church because it was occupied mostly by children. So his darkest script, his shooter manifesto, he gave his indication of what he wanted to do. And if we can't see that, then we need much more education in regards to active shooters, hardening a target, a soft target, how to respond, how to prevent it, mitigation, all of those things. Folks, again, FanDuel is our sponsor, and you can go on FanDuel and place a bet through and on the Believe Network. So this is a very tough subject to talk about, but it seems these active shooters occur every couple of weeks. So we're all screaming out as citizens of this country to our politicians, do something. Do something. And what is the answer? Is gun confiscation the answer? No, absolutely not. That's never going to happen in the United States. Is more gun laws? Well, the progressives don't want to prosecute people who use guns illegally. So why do they want more laws? So they can just point to the laws when something bad happens and they refuse to use them to prosecute people. So these are all situations. These are all things that we have and we have to think about. Folks, I want you to think about this, and I want you to think about me when I talk about mitigation, hard targets, soft targets, and think about the active shooter problem in this country. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Have a great day, everyone, and God bless.
One episode just ain't enough.